bad days for Hunter Biden. We've got a couple of headlines we're going to go through. First, he got this news. Prosecutors advance the tax probe of Hunter Biden, coming over from the Wall Street Journal, saying that the grand jury heard witnesses in February about drug use and the spending habits of the president's son. So the DOJ going after Hunter Biden. But he got some additional bad news. Turns out his wife is in Brazil with another dude, hanging out there on the beach while he's back in Delaware facing potential prosecution. So we're going to go through this. You can see that his wife, Melissa Cohen, age 35, continues to live it up down there in Rio de Janeiro. And she is frolicking in the ocean with a male pal who looks, pretty tattooed up, just like Hunter Biden. And so they're out there having a good time with each other. So we're going to cover both stories. Let's start with the criminal bad news for Hunter Biden. Prosecution for tax evasion. We get more from the Wall Street Journal. They tell us a federal tax investigation is gaining momentum as it proceeds against Hunter Biden as the prosecution picks up. They say several of his associates and sources have come forward detailing his foreign income sources, how he handled his finances, according to people familiar with the matter. Now, all of this stuff, the investigation that takes place when prosecutors and investigators are sort of deciding whether to make criminal indictments, most of this is taking place behind closed doors. You really can't be involved in any of this. It's a grand jury proceeding, and it's extremely secretive and protective. And so these are just conversations that are happening sort of on the margins between Wall Street Journal journalists communicating with people who know what's actually going on. But again, it's not official public record, so there's nowhere we can really check and see if any of this stuff is happening. In recent weeks, prosecutors from the attorney's office, U.S. Attorney's Office, sought information and grand jury testimony about Biden's money from the natural gas company Burisma and how he used that money to pay some of his obligations. Last month, prosecutors dug into drug and alcohol use, spending habits, state of mind back in 2018. Another person saying that they're exploring whether there's any potential criminal tax case, really investigating that. More comes out, says prosecutors seek to get testimony to secure it and create a record before the case moves forward so that people's testimony don't change as things progress. In the past year, prosecutors have called several of Biden's associates, bringing them in to testify. Prosecutors have found in particular that some of these people said on the payments from Burisma, which came from a company they called Rosemont Seneca Bohai, before going to Biden. So you see, the money is sort of transferring hands several times before it ends up in Biden's bank account. And we've seen several of the documents that detail all of the different entities that Hunter Biden and some of his business partners created when they were doing business together. We saw, Rosemont Seneca. We actually saw in one of these subpoenas that came out from the Department of Justice a list of all these different subsidiaries, and they were sort of like RSP1, RSP2, RSP2 Alpha, RSP2 Bravo, right? Literally creating just a number of different, essentially shell companies or separate LLCs, probably exactly for this purpose, to take money from one entity to another. It flows from Burisma, flowed to Rosemont Seneca Bohai, then it goes to Biden. And then that sort of, that connection wears out and they got to do something else. So they are examining now whether he violated tax laws or any other tax code, and especially those governing foreign relationships with foreign governments. Prosecutors have also asked questions about several companies associated with Hunter Biden. They're examining whether he moved funds in a way to obscure his tax liability, so bouncing around from one entity to another. One of the people familiar with the matter said that person and others that the prosecutors also focused on how money came from Burisma, how it went to Rosemont Seneca, how it went to a Delaware entity where he did some of his spending. And so, we've seen many of these things. All of the different companies just created to move money around. Prosecutors want to know about his use of money to buy a car, said that he had money from Kazakhstan wired. $142,300 went over to Rosemont Seneca. So from Kazakhstan to Rosemont Seneca through bank statements, that money came from a Singapore company controlled by Kazakhstan banker Kenjis Rakishev. And he sort of writes in the memo line, like when you're filling out a bank, a check, you say, a rent or whatever. He says, for a car. All right. So $142,000 going over to Hunter Biden, for a car. Mr. Rakishev, who is close with the Kazakhstan's leadership, had sought business opportunities with Hunter in the U.S. and elsewhere, said a former associate of Hunter Biden who was being questioned by prosecutors. And remember, Daddy's vice president at this time. A day after the money was received by Rosemont Seneca, the entity's banking statements show it wired that money over to a New Jersey car dealer. Oh, isn't that nice? Hunter's getting new wheels, baby. The money purchased a Fisker sports car, which is a terrible car back then, for Hunter Biden to be owned in the name of Rosemont Seneca. Now, that was sort of a really flashy car back, $142,000. It was one of these Tesla competitors that was, one of the first EV vehicles out there. But Hunter didn't like that. And so he went back out and traded it for a silver Porsche because it was a terrible car. It's a good call. He went to better decision on that change, but obviously corrupt as heck. What is he doing out there? Taking $142,000 from Kazakhstan from business opportunities when his daddy's the vice president? We all know what that's about. Here it says the Journal couldn't determine, though, unfortunately, how close the investigation is to completion. But progress being made doesn't mean that they're ultimately going to file charges, right? It's very good to have your daddy be the president of the country when you're under criminal investigation and, you've got the Department of Justice and basically the entire media establishment and everything on your side. It's very convenient. Here, the investigation is one of several politically charged probes unfolding. Garland is leading it all up from the Department of Justice. The Journal has reported that Biden, who's now 52 years old, the younger, was leveraging his family's name in his business dealings, saying that he was working with tycoons in Europe and China who wanted to bolster credibility at home. Yeah, it's the vice president's son. He's working over here. He's great. Whatever you need, get him a car, get him all sorts of problematic connections that connect him with, things that are going to wreck his body and life and mind. And he got a lot of that for everybody who wanted to exploit him. They did. They paid him a lot of money to do it, and he lapped it up. The tycoon stood to benefit from association with the name. As the investigation unfolded, here's what I'm talking about: well-documented problems of drug abuse and all of the efforts to treat it. They say that could serve as a defense for the criminal tax case. Yeah, he's just drugged out of his mind. He had no idea what he was doing. So that's going to be a real nice defense. You see how this works, folks? Nothing happens to these people because they are in a different category. Mr. Biden is paid around $1 million that he owes in back taxes, trying to clear all this up. He wrote about it in the memoir. It says we're all alone in our addiction. Doesn't matter how much money you have, who your friends are. In the end, we all have to deal with it ourselves. First one day, then another one, and then the next. Well, there's other ways to do it. You can sort of turn your life and will over to the care of God, and there's other modalities there, Hunter. But during his 2020 campaign, the elder Mr. Biden frequently pointed to his son's struggles. In one of his debates against Mr. Trump, Mr. Biden said his son dealt with the drug problems like many Americans. Says he's fixed it and worked on it. I'm proud of him. That's pretty great. Good for him. The New York Times earlier reported some details about the inquiry and so on. And so the rest of the article, of course, you can go read on it, on the Foreign Agent Registration Act and how he's violating all of those things. Prosecutors are taking a deep dive into that, but we'll see if anything comes of it. Like I said, very convenient when your dad happens to be the president of the country and he runs the Department of Justice that's responsible for these things. So we'll see if anything comes out on that. While that is happening, Hunter Biden also facing some other bad news. His wife is out there palling around with somebody on the beach. The Daily Mail got this coverage. You see some of these photographs, and they're saying, life's a beach, Hunter. Isn't it just the worst when you're getting now investigated for federal tax evasion problems? Well, your wife's out there living lavishly. She's on the beach in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, out there in a bikini, and she's holding hands with some fella over there that looks like he's got some tattoos and maybe even an earring. So things are about to get wild over there. Now, here are some additional photographs just for totality. We can see it looks like these two are here. And quite frankly, I didn't even know that Hunter Biden was married. I mean, that's kind of a shocker to me, but maybe it's an open relationship, just like Hollywood. I don't know. So we've got these two are out there and they're hanging out. I'm sure they're just, totally innocent. They're looking at this jewelry. Yeah, it's beautiful. So here you can see Melissa Cohen soaked up the sun in a red bikini on Saturday. The South African activist 35 was frolicking in the ocean and sipping on a coconut drink on the sand with two male pals during the afternoon in Rio de Janeiro. Oh no, Cohen showed off her toned figure in a string bikini and her cheeky bottoms. Opting to leave her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. And look at this. They are frolicking, folks. They weren't kidding here. Mom appeared to be having a great time as she laughed and splashed around with one of her friends. in the ocean when she wasn't in the waves. Oh man, they are rubbing his face in this with this article. They are being, they're being pretty aggressive here. She was basking in the sun, alternating between lying on her back and on her stomach on a towel in her lounge chair. Is this okay? At one point, someone who was selling drinks stopped by in the area on the sand. They all brought fresh coconut. All right. And then she was seen showering the sand and the salt water off her body before leaving for the day. That's incredible journalism. Well done. Amazing. She skipped a cover up because why? She's out there hanging out with her new man, leaving wearing her bikini and her white flip-flops. Cohen and her friend photographed with Secret Service agents, and they rolled suitcases down the street. So it's a sanctioned visitation trip. She traveled last week to the Orphan Starfish Foundation to benefit the LGBTQ plus community, indigenous children, and the victims of trafficking and abuse, which would be great. Yeah, so all of that wreckage that Hunter caused, sounds like she's out there trying to fix some of that up. So meanwhile, she's out hanging out with a couple of dudes. Let's see. So she's out there. We got enough of the picture. You see what's going on here. Now, prosecutors have been focused on all of this. They say they're looking into whether he violated tax laws. And of course he did. So hopefully they come up with a truthful resolution and they figure out that, yeah, there's a lot of problems here because this family has been, sort of grifting off America for the last 40 years or so. And they're going to continue to do it. They've got 2.5 years left, at least, of this one term. And there's a lot of goods to be gobbled up and a lot of repercussions to be escaped, as very likely is going to happen in the Hunter Biden case. What do you think? Do you think that Hunter Biden is going to be indicted for tax evasion, or is this whole thing going to evaporate? And my second question is, do you think that Hunter Biden and Ms. Cohen here are going to rekindle their long lost marriage and run off happily ever after into the sunset? I don't either. I hope to hear from you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.